Bridging the Divide. And my name's Ian Welsh. I'm a nurse by profession. I'm a registered nurse in the UK, and I'm working as a lecturer in nursing at the University of Derby online. And I'm joined this morning with my colleague, Dr. Pauline Green, and I'll just hand over to Pauline and let her introduce herself as well.
Hello and welcome. It's really nice to be involved in this talking point discussion with Ian, and I will be meeting you again actually at, in a couple of the sort of later talking points towards the end of the module that you're studying. But yes, welcome. My name's Dr. Pauline Green, as Ian has said. I'm academic lead for social work and social care. Just very, very briefly, my background is in social work initially. Well, I started in residential care with adults and then qualified as a social worker in 1984 and have worked in all sorts of different areas. I have worked with children, but actually mainly with adults and mainly in health settings, in hospitals, as I've kind of travelled around the country, so different areas, and worked with people who are living with dementia and their families, and been very involved in arranging packages of care and working with people in a person-centred way. So, but I'm now an academic, and the modules that I'm involved in, the programmes that I'm involved in, do cover dementia, and so I'm really pleased to be involved in this MOOC, and it's really nice to talk to you and to be part of the discussion with Ian today. So I'll go back to Ian.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Pauline. First of all, can I say how pleased we all are that so many people are joining this MOOC. We've got over 1,000 people from a number of different countries who've expressed an interest and who are participating in the discussion forums and gaining badges for the activities. So that really is encouraging, and I'm glad that we're reaching out to so many people. And from the feedback that we're getting, it's quite apparent that you're pleased with the quality of the materials that are available to you. And our thanks have to go to the team who put this together. And I can't myself take any responsibility for that, but we've had a very dedicated team of people who have created these learning resources, and we're really appreciative of that. And it's really good to see so many of you participating in the discussion forums. And I'd like to just pick out a few of the comments that have been made. Margaret Noblet has said that she works as an activities coordinator in a care home with people with dementia, and she enjoys finding ways of communicating with them and finding out what they could do and engaging them in activities which were meaningful. And she goes on to say, these activities raise their self-esteem for a short period. Now, next week, we will be discussing communication and compassion. So it's quite interesting that that's one of the first things that Margaret actually pointed out, that by communicating with people and finding out what they could do in their activities, it raised their self-esteem. So that was, thank you for that contribution, Pauline. And another point that was brought up by Tekla Nogo Henakin, and she doesn't say which country she's from, but by inference, she says that many people in my country become a caregiver, but they lack the knowledge of dementia, and she pities those people who are not treated well, and because the carers lack the knowledge of dementia. And what she wants to do is to pass the knowledge on that she's gaining. So that is excellent, because what we really want, not just for people to take part in this course, but for you to pass your knowledge, your insights on to help other people.
Yeah, and can I just comment there, Ian? It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, often people want to care for people with dementia in the right way, and they want to be compassionate, but they're not quite sure how to do that, and they're not quite sure how to communicate. And not so long ago, I was in a residential home for people with dementia. There was a student there on placement, And I was really, really impressed, because as I was sitting there and I was talking to the student, we were in the lounge, and this carer was there with this lady, and the lady was saying and asking quite a number of times really about a key. She was asking about where her key was, and the carer was very, very patient, kind, responsible, I thought, in her response. She was answering each time. She wasn't just saying, "Oh, you've asked me that. I don't know how many times. I've already told you about that." She was answering each time in a very responsible and caring way. And I did speak to that carer afterwards, and the carer said, and I said how impressed I was about her attitude, her caring attitude. But the carer said, that she had been on training, and that she did now know how to respond when somebody kept asking, the same question time and time again. So it's interesting, isn't it? I think sometimes it's about knowing, people want to be caring and respond, but they don't quite know how to do that.
Yeah, yes, indeed, and that's a lovely anecdote that you told there, Pauline, because it shows the benefit of understanding the patient's condition. It upsets me when I hear people, and I do frequently. I have friends who've got relatives with dementia, and it upsets me when they're recounting incidents where they're laughing about the person and they're saying, "I've just told her that and she didn't take it in," and I struggle to get over the fact that no, she didn't take it in because she can't take it in. And that's what this module is about. It's about bridging the divide, isn't it? It's about helping the both parties, the carers, the families, and the person with dementia, helping them to relate to each other. And this is something that we will be discussing more fully next week. And next week's activities are about communication. But if you can understand the physiology, what goes on, and some of the learning materials this week have shown the actual causes of dementia, then that might help to, if that can be conveyed to other people, that might help people to understand that it's not a laughing matter. They really cannot. People with dementia really cannot take new information in.
Yeah, can I comment? It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a bit like that when, you're studying and you start to know about child development, and you look at some of the theories around how children develop, and we're very aware that their brains are developing, at a certain rate or in a certain way. And actually, they can only do certain things and take in certain things. So, for instance, knowing about money, for instance, at a certain age, that's going to be very difficult for their brain to understand that and to know about change and things. But I mean change as in the money. But then, as they get older, that becomes quite an easy task. But the brain will only develop at the rate that it can develop, as children are growing. And I think people don't always understand that. But then if you think about then the brain again later on and what might happen to that when we're older, and certainly in the case of dementia, again, once we're told about that and we understand it, it's much easier to work with people and, to know what's happening for them, because of that brain development.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting that reference to children and children's development is an interesting one, because we don't have expectations of children beyond what we think are their capabilities. And likewise, I think many people need to readjust their expectations of the abilities of elderly people, particularly elderly people who are suffering from dementia. Somebody who is fully grown up to be able to do fully grown up things, to think in the appropriate ways, and of course that isn't always the case. So yes, it's interesting that the expectations we have of children, we limit those expectations, but we don't do that necessarily with people with dementia. when you were talking about change and dealing with money, brought to mind a comment made by Paul Christopher Perrin, who said, and he has an ideal, Paul has this ideal, he says, my dream is that we have a town built in England, and just for carers and people affected by dementia, where people can go safely shopping and to the restaurants, to the cinema. Now that is an ideal, but I wonder, Pauline, if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, do you know what? I think that would be absolutely fantastic, wouldn't it? Because I think people would feel safer. They would be with other people who know, you know, what the situation is. And actually, next week we're having the Guardian are having a live question and answer session. It's going to be on Tuesday next week, and you know, people can go onto the Guardian website and they can sign up for that and be part of that live discussion. And quite a number of different panel members will be there. A couple of us here from the University of Derby Online Learning Department will take part in that discussion. But it's all about communities, you know, and people in communities being very aware of what it's like for people who are caring for people with dementia and for people themselves with dementia. And so there'll be lots of discussions, hopefully, about what you've just mentioned, maybe. And I'm just thinking, you know, even locally where I live, I can't say the name of the store, but, you know, people have signed up in stores to be dementia friendly. And, you know, we'll recognise that if somebody has dementia and they go into that store and they may need extra support, help, they may not be sure where they are, or they may want to make contact with somebody, that actually the people in that store have had some training and they know how to deal with that, and very nicely will hopefully, you know, offer them a seat, some time, a cup of tea maybe, you know, and make contact perhaps with somebody that knows them and you know, would want to know where they are. So I really love the idea of this community, village, town, whatever you might want to call it, where everybody is very aware and very supportive of those who are living with dementia and their families and carers.
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. I think you've raised some really interesting points there, and the one that I like is the notion of stores, businesses being dementia aware and making allowances for people with dementia so that they are still part of our community. I'm not quite sure that I would go along with the idea of a special community solely for people with dementia, because I'm not quite sure how practical that could be. But I think the very practical options are for all businesses, restaurants, cinemas, to have the dementia awareness and to be able to cater for people with dementia so they don't feel uncomfortable and feel part of the community.
It's a difficult one, isn't it, Ian? Because I'm just kind of thinking now as well about, in a way, you know, you want people to be inclusive in a community, don't you, that we all live together. And in a way, it's a bit scary to think about boundaries as well with a community where maybe, you know, people with dementia live within certain boundaries. But actually, I just heard a story the other day as well, and it is quite frightening. You know, my brother-in-law works in mountain rescue, and you know, he has a dog. The dog is trained to seek and find, but you know, they were involved in a search the other day and found this woman in the woods who had just wandered off and really didn't know where she was. I mean, the woods were very close to her home, but it was very frightening, I'm sure, for her and for the family. And there was kind of something when you said then about the community that, you know, if there is just this kind of area, not just building, but area with everything there, but with a kind of a safe boundary to it where maybe people would feel safer that they're not going to wander off and don't know where they are.
Yes, I think that's a good point, actually, Pauline. And if people locally know that somebody is vulnerable, then they can keep an eye out for them and make sure that, you know, within their limits, that that person is at least safe. There's a gentleman that lives near me, and he has a form of dementia, and I quite often see him, and we will stop and chat, and he's not capable of having a rational conversation. But to me, I feel it's important that he has communication with somebody, and he now calls me my friend. He said, "You're my friend, Ian, aren't you?" And I say, "Yes, you know, I am." And I think it's part of our responsibility as citizens to make other people feel safe, and also to feel welcome within the society, and not to feel excluded from society. But these are things which, you know, we learn with experience, and through meeting people in different situations and with different levels of disability. But one question or a comment that has been made in the discussion board by Roberta Mangian said that she is dismayed that healthcare professionals know so little about dementia and do not receive training unless they sign up for specialist courses. And I wonder, Pauline, if you have any thoughts on that from a social work perspective. I, at one time, was in charge of running a nursing degree course, a pre-registration degree course. And although we had a care of the elderly component, we certainly did discuss dementia within that component. We expected the students to learn a lot from clinical practice. So I don't think that we had, well, I know that we didn't have a unit of any substance called dementia. Maybe we should. I don't know how, you know, how that resonates with your experience.
Yes, well, absolutely the same as yours, really. And I'm just thinking back now, and I don't ever remember you know, studying about dementia. I think if you decided to do something, you had a placement and you decided to do something, say, as an independent study, that was different. You would have investigated it a bit more. My experience really of working with people with dementia was from placements, but also when I was in practice. And I think it's a real shame that academically I didn't study, you know, some of the theory and whatever else around that to prepare me for going into practice. So I'm really pleased, and I suppose very keen, and that's why these modules exist and why this MOOC is running as well, because within our degree, the degree that I lead and the masters, and actually we have a university advanced diploma as well, you know, dementia features very significantly there. But I'm really delighted that this MOOC is out there for everybody to be able to access it. People living with dementia themselves, their carers, anybody, professionals. You know, I'm really hoping actually that school children, young people at college are actually accessing this material as well, because we're living in a community, you know, where people have dementia. And isn't it great to think that actually we are giving out this information to people so that they become more aware and can use it and can talk to others about it?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And I think, and those of you who've read the information about the rise in incidence of dementia, you'll be aware that it is becoming more and more of a global problem. And one of the functions, or one of the requirements, I should say, of professional educators is to make sure that their curricula are up to date and reflect the needs of society as it is developing, and because of the increased incidence of dementia, this really ought to take a priority on our curriculum. And I'm quite sure that that will be the case. And I know that there are colleagues in Derby who are very committed to this. I'd just like to, while we're talking about nursing, refer to a motion that was passed in the UK only this week by the Royal College of Nursing. And the motion was that it should be permitted to allow nurses with dementia to continue to practice. And Pauline, I wonder if you have any thoughts on this, about whether or not nurses who are showing the early signs of dementia should be allowed to practice, or should they be stopped from practice and in fact possibly even removed from the professional register.
Oh, okay, interesting. I suppose first of all I'd be thinking about the severity maybe of the dementia, the impact that the dementia has on that nurse. There'd be a couple of things that very quickly come to my mind. I mean, first of all, it would be to do with things like medication, you know, administering medication. But, you know, there are processes in place to actually make that very safe. And presumably, you know, those processes would cover that. The other thing, though, that comes to mind is, and I suppose this is about having worked in hospital as a social worker for so many years, and this is about, you know, when you're assessing or you're talking to a patient and or a service user and or to the family, and it might be that that nurse is told something, and it can be quite significant, but they're told something not in amongst all the paperwork or in amongst that proper kind of, you know, discussion assessment, but maybe just something, and it's very significant. Now, would they remember it? That would be a bit of a concern of mine. Would they remember it? Would they then tell the interprofessional team? Would they record it? Or maybe because of short-term memory loss, would it get lost? You know, would it be forgotten and not passed on? And I know that can happen quite a lot, can't it, when we're working in a hospital environment? There's lots of things that people will tell us, not necessarily within that you know, assessment period or talking, that it might be just outside of it, just as you're walking away on a corridor. I don't know. That's the only thing that comes straight to mind.
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. I think that's an interesting point that you've made, actually, because one of the important features of professionalism and within the caring profession is that we need to be acutely aware of the bits of information which are given to us, which might sometimes be a throwaway line, or it might be something which is said to us in confidence, or it's just passed on to us one way or the other. And the fact that the nurse concerned might forget that and not pass it on is indeed a concern. And I think this is something that needs to go into the debate. A lot of nursing, as in much of professional practice, can be quite routine. And so routine tasks like bathing patients, bed making, feeding patients and so on, can be done quite safely in the early stages of dementia, I think. But we need to focus, and I'm not just talking about nursing now, but I'm talking about any occupation. We need to focus on what a person can do as much as we focus on what they can't do. And you quite rightly commented on some of the negative things there, which could be dangerous, and those need to be taken into account. But if we stop somebody from making a living, or from doing a job which they find satisfying and making a contribution, we are inhibiting that person's quality of life. If we look at what they can do and say, okay, we are aware, and this is a manager's responsibility, we are aware that you're in the early stages of dementia, you can do certain things, these are the tasks that you will be given, but you cannot administer medicines, or you cannot calculate drug dosages. And that should be the understanding, that we allow people to do what they can do. But there is this grey area, and you quite rightly said. And so I don't have an answer, but I'm throwing it out for discussion. This is a talking point. Be curious to know what people think about this. And this particularly would be relevant for Unit 3, when we talk about maintaining independence. So I'm throwing it out there. No answers, that's the question. Should people with dementia, and in this instance nurses, should they be allowed to practice, to continue to work? So unless, Pauline, you have anything else to add, I think this might just about round up our talking point for this week. Is there anything you'd like to come in with, Pauline?
No, but thank you very much for involving me in this first unit talking point. It's really interesting, and it's great to hear what people are saying and asking, isn't it? And such an interesting, I suppose, from a dilemma, ethical point of view, what you've just been discussing there. So yes, let's see what people think about it, and I'm sure they'll be, you know, asking questions, and it'll create great discussion. No, I'm not going to see you now for a little while unless you invite me in for a particular reason, because something's happened maybe in the media, or I don't know. We'll see. But I will be talking towards the end of the module on the last 2 sessions. And what I'm planning to do, hopefully, is to talk about memory boxes in one of those. Because I have just written a blog that's been published this week, and I really want to talk about, made me think about my memory, what memories I have, what triggers them, and I've done it in relation to the 5 senses. So I'm going to have a much bigger discussion about that towards the end of the module, and I will invite somebody in with me to talk about their memories as well. And then I'm also going to, just in the final session probably, talk about the question and answer debate discussion with the Guardian, and see what people are saying there. So thank you very much, and I really hope you enjoy the next unit, Unit 2. I'm sure you will. And goodbye. Thank you, Ian, for inviting me.
And thanks very much, Pauline, for joining us as well. Really appreciate that. Yeah, so there we go. That's we've had quite a lot to talk about this morning, and really pleased that your contributions are making this into a very lively and interactive program of study. And I'm glad it's not all one way. I'm glad it's not just us talking to you, telling you things. I'm glad that you're getting involved, sharing your experiences, sharing your thoughts. So keep it coming. We really appreciate it, and we really do read every comment. So thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. And I'll be joined next week by one of my colleagues, Susan Brock, who is also a nurse. And so thank you again, Pauline, and thank you all very much for watching this talking point.